Hi, it's Cheryl, Senior Living Family Advocate, and I wanted to talk today about timing. It's one of the things I get asked most by families. They want reassurance that moving their loved one to a community, the time is right, and how do I know when it's the right time? And obviously, when I say trust your gut and you'll know when you know, isn't the response that they want from me. I do believe that, but there are other ways, and a lot of it has to do with how are you handling this emotionally, because time goes on, caregiving gets harder and harder, especially when you're dealing with somebody with dementia. So if your spouse, for instance, I had a gentleman who was like, oh, my wife is lovely during the day, I barely, remember that she has dementia, but she starts sundowning at night, and she wanders all night long, and she's verbally abusive, and she's exit seeking. If your spouse is trying to leave the house all the time, obviously, and you can't keep them safe, that would be a reason to move them. Behaviors when they are angry a lot at you, and they're just mean in general. I know that sounds silly, but it's like, if that's day after day, it gets exhausting. It really gets hard to deal with. Now, sometimes it's the opposite. I had somebody say, oh, my wife is, lovely and, sweet, but they couldn't get away from them. So it becomes a situation where your spouse becomes fearful if you're not in the room. So you can't go read a book in your bedroom. You can't get away from them. They're with you 24/7. And that also sometimes, they'll be asking you the same question every 5 minutes over and over and over again. And if you're looking at me like, oh, why should that be so difficult? Try living that every day of your life. It is exhausting and it is very hard. So, it's emotionally difficult to keep them at home anymore. And you've gotten to the point where you can't handle it anymore. If they are having problems with, all of a sudden they need toileting assistance and showering assistance, and they're falling all the time, especially with the toileting assistance. If you have gentlemen from a certain era, they didn't even take care of babies. They're just not comfortable, toileting their wives. It's very difficult for them to handle. And I've always said, it's okay. We're not all built to be caregivers. We all do our best. Some people are better at it than others. So please don't judge, and that's the other thing. I've had people say, well, I kept my husband home until the end. Why can't you do it? Well, because some people can't. And you really shouldn't judge other people about the situation, because especially when you're dealing with dementia, it's just a whole different ball game, and it is a very hard thing to live with on a day-to-day basis. So if you need resources, if you need to talk, if you need help, just give me a call, a text, an email. I'm here to help.